There's a lot of noise out there today, cloud this, cloud that. We think that term is a little bit whitewashed out there in the industry. But we want to take a look at what it means to run and operate a cloud at an enterprise scale. And after I give a little bit of an update, I'm going to bring a couple people on stage who are going to show you what I look at as the art of the possibility, what we're helping clients with today, what we see as kind of table stakes for a lot of organizations that we deal with. So first, I'd like to thank you guys, our clients, for making the time to come here today. We have people that came from a lot of different places. This is a small sampling of our customer base today, but people obviously from the Chicagoland area, from Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, North Carolina, and Minnesota, and probably many other places. We appreciate the time you've invested today. Our relationship with you is ultra important, and you as customers really inspire us on a day-to-day basis to do what we do. I'd also like to thank our sponsors. We can't put this day on without them. We, as I mentioned earlier, invest a ton of time in this day, but we have over 30 sponsors helping us put on this event today. I'd encourage you to visit them throughout the day, learn about what they're bringing to market. This is a subset of who we go to market with, but some of our most important partners. For the last 4 years, we've had a core mantra to this event, and I put it up here every year to remind us of why we're here. It's the change that's upon us, and I want everyone to really think about stepping out of their day-to-day office mentality. I know we can all get sucked in. I know there's things happening back at the ranch, but today is really about tomorrow, thinking about how next year a robot isn't on stage and Alexa isn't delivering this presentation, but really how we come today with an open mind. We want to learn new things. We want to be challenged every day and really leave with a new mission. And when I look at it, why are we here today? We're here today to collaborate. That was really, beyond Wi-Fi, that was the #1 thing that people said they came to this event for. It was to collaborate with their peers and to learn about innovative solutions. And really, in my mind, it's to drive change. So whether that change is within your own career, whether it's within your team, or whether it's within your company, think about the change that you want to walk out of here today and impact your organization, yourself, your team on a day-to-day or week-to-week or long-term basis. It doesn't take a lot to make a big impact. I'm going to try to keep the Ahead infomercial to a bare minimum, but this was a big year for us, just as we talked about 2017 being the 10-year anniversary of the iPhone and 10-year anniversary of really the insemination of cloud computing. It's our 10-year anniversary as an organization. So this is a picture actually of the new office we just moved into right down the street at 401 North Michigan Avenue. I'd encourage everyone here to stop by, come in, visit us. We have a great briefing center, and we're really proud of this new office. This is the library, and then you can see our new lab environment here, which I'll talk about in a minute. We now have over 500 enterprise clients. We're really proud of that. We really like to build long and deep relationships with our customers, and they're across all different types of verticals: legal, financial, manufacturing, retail, healthcare. Last year, we did just south of $500 million in revenue. We're growing very rapidly, and as I said earlier, this day is really put on by 200-plus employees of Ahead, 250-plus employees of Ahead, and it takes a team, it takes a village to get it done. We're really proud of what we've built overall, but we're especially proud of this day. We've opened a bunch of new offices since we stood here last year. That's to get closer to our customer base. but our customers pull us into new geographies. Earlier this year, we opened an office in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We're really excited about this. This is really an R&D center, great companies, great colleges, college in Ann Arbor, and we have a great team that's developing a lot of our core IP in the cloud. We call this A squared for the AHEAD Accelerator or Ann Arbor. Obviously, our headquarters here in Chicago. We now have offices in Columbus, Cincinnati. We're still in Madison and Milwaukee, obviously, and we opened an office in January in Minneapolis, and now we've been incubating a team for a couple years out of North Carolina, and we opened an office there, as well as we have one in Southfield, Michigan. So we keep growing throughout the Midwest and beyond, and we're pretty proud of that. My hope is that regardless of whether you've been working with us for 10 years or you're checking us out for the first time today, that you really get an understanding of who we are and what we do today, because it's very different from what we did 5 years ago, 3 years ago, and in some ways even 18 months ago. So we're evolving as well. And that evolution is this culture that we believe is very important. It's a culture of continual investment at AHEAD. We invest a tremendous amount in people. People are our product at AHEAD. There's no other more critical resource that we have. So when we look at the technical talent we bring to the table, on the sales side, on the delivery side, on the consulting side, in all parts of our organization, we're really proud of our team and our people. I showed a little picture of our lab. We continue to pour millions of dollars every year into our lab environment. As I mentioned, we're building out the new lab at 401 North Michigan. When we moved into this new building, they only had a certain amount of floor space for us due to cooling and power in the building, but it actually turned out to be kind of a blessing in disguise. And we've built a second lab out at Equinix, and we've taken advantage of that facility and its direct connects into some of the major cloud providers to help with our work around the lab and AHEAD Aviation, which I'll talk about in a minute. We invest a tremendous amount in evaluating partnerships and what's out there and what products we think and services we think are critical to not only evolving our business, but more importantly, what we think our clients need to be looking at. So, I showed you a list of the partners we have out here today. You can go to our website for our full list of partners, but we spend a ton of time evaluating new technology in our lab, understanding who the teams are, and looking at what's coming out in the next 12, 24, 36 months, bringing it in, getting early access. We have great relationships with the venture capital community, Greylock, Lightspeed, 83 North, a lot of the premier VCs out there who are asking for our opinion, asking us to look at new technology, and they obviously want access to you, our customers, but it's a very mutually beneficial relationship that we're able to bring some thought-leading and innovative solutions to the market, and you'll see a lot of that here today. We invest a lot in training, so back to our people, we love to train them, send them to self-paced training, online training, in person, and conferences. And all that, from people to our lab to our partnerships to the training we give them, results in us developing IP that we ultimately build our services around. And that's becoming more and more important today, because everything we do is highly interconnected, and everything we do is about stitching different pieces of different platforms together. So this culture of investment is something that's just in our DNA as a company. One of the things that's really critical and that we're seeing today is that we are all navigating an extremely complex shift. Nick talked about it. You guys live it every day. We're living it. As I mentioned earlier, our business is way different from what it was 10 years ago. But we're trying to figure out, where do I build apps? How do I make infrastructure decisions? What should my teams look like? And I think a lot of that is what we intend to talk about today, is how do we navigate this complex shift? And if I look at it, there's really these worlds colliding. And there's a lot of different analogies that we can use. And you see a lot of ahead people wearing their red Chuck Taylors around here today. But many of you come here today because you're the challengers. You're the change agents. You're the ones who want to make an impact. Not just because it's cool to do so. You want to make an impact because you're trying to help change the way your business is being operated. You're trying to help figure out how to move faster, how to grow your business, how to grow your career. So it's a good thing that these worlds are colliding, because that provides opportunity. And what we see out there, and what I think we'd like to show you today, is a lot of our customers want to innovate like startups do. And if I look at the attributes that many startups live by, it's experiment, fail fast, value time to market, be agile, take risks, be disruptive, both from a marketplace and a culture perspective. But we, again, live in the enterprise, and enterprises have to deal with process, which isn't always a bad thing, and compliance and governance issues, and have to be financially savvy and actually make money. They have to worry about the long term. They have to define and live by a specific org structure, and they often have to implement standards, whether that's back to processes or other things. And so these two worlds are what we're trying to bring together. We want to make our clients live in an agile world, experiment and fail fast, but also do it in a way where the SEC or the FDA or HIPAA or other organizations aren't knocking on their door. So smashing these worlds together is what we're all about today. Our view of the market is cloud is the new normal. There's not a customer we walk into, there's not a situation we're talking about where cloud isn't top of mind. And to us, we don't really differentiate whether that's in your own data center, whether that's out at Amazon, Azure, Google. What we do know, it's going to be some combination of two or more of those different destinations. Everyone's looking at multiple places, multiple targets in the future. This shift, as Nick just talked about, as we fundamentally believe, is not about technology. The technology is here to do all the things we want, to move faster, to offer self-service, to get transparency to information and financial data. It's all about the people. People willing to take risks, to make change, to fundamentally make tough decisions. So we're seeing in organizations, it's the people side of things. How should I organize? What should my teams look like? Should I smash them together? How does all this impact what we're doing? How do we keep the lights on while we're doing it, because we have a business to operate while we go through much of this transformation? Speed, everyone loves to talk about speed matters and money doesn't, but we know both do, but we do see speed outweighing cost in a lot of different places. We have to be mindful of cost in everything we do. It's not like we can just throw it to the side, but moving fast, making decisions, empowering teams, both from access to technology, but also in making decisions, is really critical. And as we've said for many years at this conference and in briefings, the relevancy of the IT organization is growing. In many organizations, the IT organization, the leadership, never had a seat at the table in the boardroom, as an example. And now more than ever, IT is a key part of that. It's how they're going to stay competitive. So to make that happen, we believe that there are some core tenets that have to be delivered within the enterprise. We have to deliver services with quality. And we're going to talk and show you some examples of that in a minute. Security is job number one. You're going to see some examples throughout the day of how we're enabling clients to build a secure foundation in the cloud. Speed, we just talked about. We have to deliver things rapidly. We have to enable people, and we have to target multiple platforms. But why does this matter? Why are we trying to accomplish this? What's the end goal? In my opinion, the end goal is to be simple, responsive, and transparent. Simple is about being easy to understand and consume. Responsive is about being agile and being able to deliver those services that we're going to show you and we're going to talk about throughout the day. And transparency is having clear visibility into things like cost. We all have lived in organizations where that's very difficult to do, and the technology and the process and the controls are here today to make that happen. But I'll be the first to admit, and this isn't to scare anyone, you're all living it, this is a complex journey today. This is the process that, and I don't expect, we're not going through all of these by any means, but from a strategy and roadmap, from a design and plan, from a deploy and manage perspective, these are some of the key attributes that we're taking customers through to have that enterprise mindset. And there's a lot to it. It isn't a simple journey. So when I look at it, there's a lot of different paths customers can take. A lot of different paths, from how you build that foundation to how you enable access to information to how you secure it. And as I've said, we have to build it not by swiping the credit card. Anyone can swipe their credit card. We're well beyond that today, and you're going to see that in a few minutes. But we have to think like an enterprise does. We have to be nimble, but we have to have the realities of what enterprises deal with in the back of our mind. And that's all about building a foundation that makes sense from a financial perspective, but is flexible, is secure. And we've taken a lot of time to step back and look what that foundation is, that blueprint is, and we present that to clients, and many of you have seen this in the form of our cloud delivery framework. Now, what a lot of our clients are doing ultimately is taking this framework and customizing it for themselves, putting their logo on here, and making it represent the services and the capabilities that they offer in their enterprise. But we fundamentally believe that in order to be competitive, agile, cost-efficient, that as you're building services for the business to take advantage of, you need to have a strong several strong pillars within your organization. You have to be able to manage your cloud from top to bottom. So that's a heavy emphasis on enterprise service management or cloud management platforms, and tying that together with a configuration management tool. You also have to have, things from a developer perspective or a platform for the developers, and help marry together both the infrastructure and the operations side of the world with DevOps. So a lot of our customers are asking us for, how do I make progress? Everyone talks about DevOps, but what's the reality? And taking all the buzzwords aside, how do I make progress by making process and integration much simpler? We're helping a lot of clients with that today. And we can't deliver these services, and we can't enable organizations to take advantage of cloud infrastructure without it being secure. So you're going to see a lot today where we're going to talk about security. And then this is all built on scalable, cost-efficient infrastructure, whether that's in your own data center, in the public cloud, converged or hyper-converged. We have opinions, but we need to do what's best based on the given requirements and situation. And then there's a bunch of things that are kind of what we're calling enterprise enablers here. These are things like the organizational side that I talked about, automation, integration via different APIs, the service catalog aspects in CMDB, which we'll show you in a minute, and then the financial side of things. How do we pay for this? How do we operate? How do we do show back or charge back? But all of this is great, and all of the efforts that our customers and progress are making is great, but if nobody knows about it, within your organization, then we're doing it, for our own need and not for the need of the real end consumers, which is the business. So we have found that a lot of our clients need to really market their efforts internally and what they're building, how they're delivering. We saw Consumers Energy up here last year tell us about their process and how they rolled out their cloud within their organization. So these are the things that we're helping, and it can be at any phase of the journey I previously showed. So whether it's a strategy, a roadmap, design work, implementation work, all of our services are geared towards these areas. And this is all about helping accelerate the delivery of applications and infrastructure. So you'll hear when you're meeting with a head, when you're at our booth, when we're talking about what we believe our clients need in order to be successful in the enterprise today, this is what we'll point back to a lot of times. And we really encourage you to take this and adopt it for your own organization, put your logo on it, add and subtract the things that are pertinent to your organization. And that's what we're doing with a lot of customers in the strategy phase of the work we do. Throughout all of this work that we've done in the cloud delivery framework with our partners, we've developed a ton of IP over the years. And that IP is about stitching together, and these are some of the example platforms that we're working a lot with, but whether it's VRO and VRA work, whether it's Puppet or modules or Chef recipes, whether it's CloudFormation templates or ARM work in Amazon and Azure, whether it's the IP that we've built around ServiceNow, all of this is helping accelerate our journey, accelerate this enterprise mentality that you'll see throughout the day-to-day. And this is invaluable stuff that's really taken us many, many years to build and accumulate. And it really is at your for you guys to help us evolve as your needs evolve, but it's really for you to take advantage of as well. And really, we want to spend a little time today showing you guys the art of the possibility. And so I'm going to call up a couple people for some demonstrations. I'm going to call up Nick Collier and Tim Curlis, two architects on our team, both heavily focused a majority of their time on the cloud. And Nick and Tim are going to show you some of the demonstrations we've built in the lab, in the cloud. And for those of you who are familiar, we use this Ahead Aviation. This is a mock company. We're not actually operating an airline yet. But we use this as a context for a lot of the demonstrations that we deliver. So Nick and Tim, why don't you guys come up? Nick's been with Ahead for about 3 years, and Tim 6 years. So I'll hand it over to them for some of the demonstrations.
All right, there's Tim gone, there we go. So thank you, everyone. And as Eric said, the theme, this year is definitely around enterprise. And when Tim and I were talking about the demos, we thought we'd do a bit of a real-world DevOps. How does app team meet infrastructure team? And so Tim gets to represent the needy application developer who thinks he's always right today. And I get to be...
You guys have never seen those, right?
And I get to be the awesome infrastructure team. So we've got three demos lined up for you right now. So the very first one we're going to go into is really around what does a modern-day enterprise portal actually look like? We've talked about service catalogs over the years. We've done VMware vRealize demonstrations, Cisco UCS Director demonstrations, et cetera. And so today we're going to take a little bit of shift and take a ServiceNow portal that our ESM team has built and what it actually means from a cloud standpoint today. Then we're going to hit enterprise OS provisioning. It's not about just cloning a VM template. Tim needs a lot more than that to get his application up and running. So what does modern day enterprise OS provisioning look like? And then we'll cover a number of the operational things which I think are key and what everybody's been telling us they want. I don't want to just provision something. How do I operate and manage it throughout its life cycle? So we'll hit tagging, reporting, and some other pieces. And with that said, let's start the first demo here. We get that rolling. And if we look, first of all, we're going to go straight into ServiceNow in this case. And this is our new portal. You can see this at the booth, so if you want to get more information. And you can see it's beyond just provisioning. We've got operations, reporting. We've got DevOps services, request for new service, which we'll show you later on, container provisioning as well, and Tim's got a session on containers later. And if we go into cloud provisioning, as Eric said earlier on, there's multiple targets that we have to account for today. I can't think of any portals that we do today with a lot of clients where it's just VMware anymore. Almost everything we're adding an Azure or Amazon Web Services component to that as well. So we can kind of see here, we still have VMware, we can click in there. We've got our typical OS requests, Azure, we've got a stack we'll show you later on. We've got Red Hat Linux on Azure, et cetera. And then, Amazon Web Services. And one thing I'd point out there, that it doesn't mean that all the services are the same between clouds. That sort of has gone away as well. There's different services from each cloud provider that we typically want to offer. But if we look at OS provisioning from the enterprise standpoint, let's go into Red Hat Enterprise Linux on Azure here. The first thing you'll notice is we put a very brief description in the service offering, what are the SLAs, what are some details there. But then we give a link to a knowledge base, and we provide a lot more information to the app development team. What is the actual Azure architecture that's going to be deployed with this ARM template? What resource group, storage account, et cetera, is it going in? More details around the service itself. We don't put these on the form because we want the form to be as quick and concise as possible for people to go through. But if they want more detail, if Tim wants to know what exactly is being deployed under the covers here, he can go and check the knowledge base there. Then if we scroll down on the form, what you'll see here, what we consider our business logic, the questions we have to ask every time that typically get missed if people do these things directly in, say, the Azure console. So in this case, we're asking for, business service, what application is this for? Is this for development, staging, production? And some of that will obviously drive automation downstream that makes selections for Tim, automatically. Then we have our second set of variables, which are really all of our technical pieces here, related to the specific cloud platform itself. So the first set of variables are unified across everything. We want to make sure we know all that business information. But then when we get into our specific target cloud, we have variable sets there that we apply and offer up that can be selected. Once we've filled all that in, it's simply then a matter of submitting the form, which we'll do here in a second, and get some feedback for Tim. So we hit submit, fires off. And there we go. Thank you for submitting your request. Tim can then click OK and immediately get the information of not just that request, but all of the other requests as well. And you can obviously see we've been building these over and over, ahead of looking ahead here. But we go into the request, and now I can get the details. Based on the Azure cost finder, this is $76.63 to run, operationally, and then he has all those variables again, that we've got down there. The end result, though, if we go to the Azure portal and take a look at what this looks like, we got our new resource group that we provisioned here. So we're in Microsoft Azure console now. We go to demo 17, and then on the right-hand side, you can see everything that's been provisioned there. So we've got our virtual machine along with the other Azure constructs. But more importantly, all that business information we've taken, and all of those tags that were in the form are automatically applied to the resource group in Azure as well. And this just doesn't apply to Azure. The example here is Azure, but if we go to something like VMware, take a look at a VMware VM, if we built it in VMware, we get the exact same set of tags there. And all of this tagging, it might sound like, repetitive, but it's so important for us to keep track of everything, now that we're beyond just VMs. The second thing, if we go into our portal and go into our cloud reporting section, we also have this view of my virtual asset, where Tim can go in and say, okay, well, I want the cloud to be more personal to me. What do I own? What are the assets that I have? And those could be VMware assets, they could be the Amazon assets, they could be the Azure assets, and he can get information on there, drill in deeper, check lease times, extensions, et cetera, and then we can put appropriate widgets, on the page. Some of those are built in, some are highly customized. The second thing as well, just to show you here, is we also do a lot of customization around dashboarding and reporting. And just to take the tags a step further, this is another portal that we have here. And we can see our monthly billing summary, first of all, that we can look at for a specific public cloud account. But just to continue that tag theme, if we go down here and just look at the tagged resources that we're seeing in environments today, and if you look at this list, it's not really just VMs, right? I mean, it's database instances, it's cloud formation stacks, it's VPC, route tables, subnets, et cetera. Everything in the environment we need to be tagged because the sprawl, if you thought you had VM sprawl, In a public cloud, we get much more sprawl, and it's across all these software constructs. The other thing also, if we look at the untagged resources, this is especially important because how do we know from a security aspect, are there a lot of things out in my environment that I don't have tagged? I can very quickly discover them, see what they are, and go and remediate those if I want to. If we go to shift to dashboards for a moment as well, we'll just wait for this to pop up. We can also create a public cloud costing dashboard. Very basic, actually very simple to do these days, but just a core fundamental item that I would say most of our customers have when they've adopted public cloud successfully. Amazon cost on the left, Azure on the right. We can see Amazon trending down right there. And these are just our costs from our lab that we've taken here, but we have real-world customer ones if we want to see them. The final thing I'll just show you from the service portal is this request for new service. How do we know what services to actually offer in there? And this is a place where Tim can go in and say, hey, my team needs this new PaaS service or this other service from Azure, Amazon, maybe a new data center service, maybe F5, whatever it might be, and actually put a request form. And this came from one of our customers who did this very successfully. They took the data from that form, funneled it into a database, and so they could continuously decide every sprint what release they release their new cloud services, what they actually want to release there.
So Nick, this is bloody great. But we've been getting OSs for years, and I still have to set those up. So what else can you give me? What more can you give me?
Tim, thank you for that very important question. I had absolutely no idea you were going to ask. But yeah, if we yeah, Tim makes a great point, right? He doesn't want an operating system, right? People want these PaaS services. They want database services, message queuing services, et cetera. And so we thought we'd give a bit of an update just on the differences between on-premises infrastructure automation. People may have seen this slide many times before at previous tech summits. This hasn't really changed at all on-premises. The service delivery model of putting in a service request, handing off to our orchestration engine, whether that's VMware, Cisco, ServiceNow, whatever your tool of choice is, and then it goes and touches all of your third-party systems, Infoblox, Active Directory, et cetera. We go and clone the VM. That really hasn't changed that much. At the end of the day, on-premises, we're typically cloning VMs, and at the end of this, it spits out an operating system. We hand it off to configuration management, and then once we've done installing all our applications on the server, we close out our change control and update it with all the latest information. So that hasn't really changed, and we continue to help customers do that. I mean, I think a lot of people are on that journey. A lot of people have sort of reached the end of that core plumbing, if you will. The public cloud, it's a little bit different, though, and we've really found that I'd say for the last couple of years, the maturity has evolved in cloud management platforms. It's no longer trying to build this orchestration against every single cloud. And instead, what we'll do is we'll order a stack. We'll pass this infrastructure as code, stack, this piece of paper of saying what we want over to the public cloud provider, and it's going to handle the automation for us. So whether it's an Azure ARM template or an Amazon CloudFormation template, it'll do the work. Then it hands off to configuration management if we've got VMs that need applications installed. And finally, to change control to close that out as well. And so the goal now is, well, how do we offer services in our service catalog and sort of marry these worlds together? We still have to do the first one. We absolutely still need to do orchestration. We still want to account for change control. We don't just want to spin up stacks all the time without any governance around them. But then how do we offer these PaaS services that Tim needs from an app development standpoint? And so if we roll that, well, actually, let me hit the slides here. If we kind of look at the next demo that we're going to walk through, first we're going to show you how to do an ARM template. So I'm going to walk you through what we do. In fact, jumping on, yeah. So this is an Azure ARM template here. That we code in. So Tim and I work on together and decide, okay, this is the stack I want. So this is Node.js with a Mongo database, and we're basically going in here, creating all our resources. So this ARM template's already created. We worked on this together. Here you can see the Mongo server on the left, the app server on the left, and all of this is the JSON for Azure that we've basically got here to get that running. And what you'll see then is from Visual Studio, which is where I am right now, I can deploy this directly to Azure. So I don't need to go into ServiceNow or anything else. I'm just working with Tim and saying, okay, I'm going to get the ARM template to the point we want it. I'm going to run it. I'm going to test it. And I'm going to deploy it directly to Azure. If we go and look in Azure now, you can see here on the right-hand side, he has all of our deployments. Some have succeeded, failed, et cetera. And I can view the specific template that was deployed. So the exact code that we used in Visual Studio, I can see there and see in Microsoft Azure what I deployed. I can then take that code, take that over to, say, ServiceNow, go in here and actually have an option here to actually plug in your ARM template. So we don't use the orchestration capability here. We use the ARM template creation capability instead. We create a new ARM template here. We take that exact piece of code that we know has worked because we've tried and tested it. We paste it into ServiceNow, and then we go ahead, and there's a few more steps after here, but in interest of time, we've sped this up. But we create a catalog item, and then in here, if we go to cloud provisioning, go to Microsoft Azure, hit the Node.js Mongo stack, and here we can see, we can provision that entire stack. But more specifically, if you look at those template parameters, those are taken directly from the JSON file that gets passed from Azure, and we just paste into ServiceNow. In addition, if we go back to ServiceNow, it's not just Azure we can do this for. If Tim wants to deploy services in Amazon, we can go to AWS. We can go to CloudFormation templates. And as you can see here, you'll see Bag API Green, which Tim's going to show a little bit more of shortly. And there we go. You can see, well, we'll pop back to slides, but that was in ServiceNow there. So just to kind of review here, these are the kind of 4 things we just went through. One is, deploying the ARM template from Visual Studio first. So we work alongside the app team to create that template. Then we basically take that template, add it to ServiceNow, so we can wrap all that governance, all those business questions I showed you in the very, very first demo, are applied now to the ARM template, and then, we publish that to Tim. So is that bloody good enough for you now, or what?
Yes, thank you. So we've been focused at Ahead a lot on DevOps, right? And Nick talked about the journey and getting that first milestone of a base OS and starting to get into stacks. But teams are working on DevOps and CI/CD and just delivering features faster. So we've been investing a lot in that. What you see on the bottom is really the reflection of Nick's solid, amazing foundation in the infrastructure pipeline. It's a pipeline that he just showed you that can give me a stack. In addition, my team on the development side has been focused on kind of getting into the DevOps mentality. So creating build and test pipelines that run automatically. As we implement more agile processes and we start checking in code 10 times a day, this process runs to build and test automatically. If we had to do this manually, it would be quite a challenge. So we've got amazing thought leadership and an intellectual property and just time spent in creating each of these pipelines. So it just obviously makes sense to link them together. And so this is fostering not only the technology and helping the cost of developing these processes, it's also helping the organization and helping development and operations teams work together because we're handing off and doing things automatically. So the idea being, if I commit 10 times a day, I don't want to go to Nick's form in a portal 10 times a day and request that stack. So now my pipelines are connected, and I can use RESTful APIs. So within my development pipeline, I can call not a different workflow, but the exact same workflow that Nick showed. We're just going to pass the parameters in via REST. And so that's what I want to show, just an example here. So we've got our application, and this is a blue-green deployment. So we've got our application running in blue today, and of course the prod box has load balancers and availability sets and different tiers, et cetera. But that's our app. It's running in production. So a developer checks in some code and automatically invokes this Jenkins pipeline, which does our building and testing. The first thing Jenkins says is, rather than having 5 development environments that live 365 days a year and only get used for a fraction of that time, we use what Nick built and create this green environment. And we do that by calling ServiceNow. ServiceNow calls the CloudFormation template that Nick showed to clone and create this stage environment. And this is a minimal environment. So the first thing we do when it's up is we look at production. So if production has 4 servers, we're going to make stage have 4 servers. If it has 2 servers, we'll make it have 2 servers. Because ultimately, if we run performance tests, we want that performance to look the same. But again, this is all completely automated. Once the environment's ready, we can tell Jenkins, it's back to you. Go ahead and run your tests automatically. So again, the continuous integration methodology here. Tests are finished. If successful, we'll go ahead and do the blue-green swap. And this is, again, automatic. So we've changed from a prod being in blue, now prod is in green. And if we fail the test before this happens, we'll notify the developer because as we know, in CI/CD, the most important thing is correcting a failure first. And if it's successful, we'll do the blue-green swap, and then we'll go ahead and notify the team via Slack. So I'd like to show kind of the third demo video here. And we recorded this one because it's quite long, but we've got this in the booth. So if you want to see much more detail, please come check it out. So got a production application running, and this is in the CMDB so that we can see it. As these things change more frequently, we need this for troubleshooting, and this updates when the blue-green swap happens. So a commit comes in, we're in Jenkins now. Jenkins is going to automatically start this build pipeline. Again, fully automated. If we click into here, we'll see what my team in the development world has built. So this pipeline initializes a green environment, automatically runs my unit tests, does the blue-green swap, and then cleans up and notifies. And so if we kind of from here hop over to the AWS Management Console, hit refresh, we can see that ServiceNow and Jenkins have instructed this template to be kicked off. So now we have this template which is spinning up our green environment. It's in the process. We see it's already got some launch configs and auto-scaling groups set up. And while this is happening, we've also gone ahead and entered a change ticket. So back in ServiceNow, if we look at this in our change dashboard, we can see there's this automatic change ticket that's been created. And if we look at the change ticket, the act of creating the green environment is pretty low risk and low impact. So we can set these correctly. We also have created a CI for this in the CMDB, again, fully automatically. So if this green environment lasts for a few days, it'll get discovered and run and be in the CMDB. So we come back over to AWS, we see the stack's complete. Now the tests proceed, and then the pipeline completes, and it's green. Because it completed successfully, it went ahead and notified Slack. This is our looking ahead Slack. There's a channel in there called DevOps Operations. So the team subscribes to that. They see all the events. We go back to the change dashboard. We see one final change ticket was entered when the blue-green swap happened, since everything was successful. So we're doing something in production. We're doing a swap. This has a little bit higher risk, but it is still a standard change in this case in our world. But it does say what was swapped, and it does update that picture of the CMDB you saw previously. And lastly, it's going to spin down everything in blue because that's what costs us money. So by spinning down blue, the stack is still there, so we could spin it back up if we had to roll back, but we've spun down the instances so that we're not paying for it. So that kind of gives you an idea. Again, there's a lot more depth we can go into at the booth. Now that we've built that, though, just talking briefly, so continuous integration, I kind of mentioned, it's this process of every time a check-in happens, we're going to automatically run our tests. But when we get to the point where we're going to go into production, there's going to be a manual gate. So we still have a process of a team coming, looking at the environment, validating that we're ready, the business is ready for the feature to go live. You can see the maturity arrow on the left. So continuous deployment is the same process, but we become so confident in it that we allow changes to go into production fully automatically without any manual gating. So I know you've all seen this. You've got maybe 5 or 6 line of business apps, and those apps have 5 or 6 teams and integration teams, and they all use different tools. Some use Subversion, some use GitHub, some use Jenkins, some use Nexus, some use ServiceNow, some use Jira, some use Slack, some use HipChat. So we're seeing and helping organizations kind of formulate this DevOps team and with some consulting, really go through and not only look at the categories and the tools from an industry's perspective, but adding in your use cases and what makes them unique for your enterprise. And out of that, we come up with this tool chain that, hey, by the way, we also don't miss any of these sections, right? You may have gaps, or teams in your organization may have gaps. So we make sure we pick one tool that's the best for our organization, and we make sure we make a complete tool chain. And from there, we want to onboard people to this. So the best way to do this is the catalog Nick showed you. We've got a CI/CD onboarding tool that allows the line of business teams developing or integrating apps to really come in and say, I'm ready to be onboarded. Here's the details. I need this environment, this code needs to be moved over. And hey, by the way, can we schedule a time to actually work on this together? So what that does is it's self-documenting, first of all. And then second of all, it's creating this queue so that you're in a reasonable amount of time getting everyone onboarding and sunsetting these existing tools. So those are just a couple of things. I'd like to hand it back to Eric now just to talk more about what we're working on and some other interesting things that are coming up.
Thanks, guys. Doesn't get more cheesy than you two working together up here. So we got about 5 more minutes. We're running a little bit behind, but we have plenty of buffer for lunch today. So we have an exciting announcement that I want to end with. Alex Matson's going to come out in a second. Alex worked for Ahead for about 5 years, went to work for Amazon Web Services for 3 years, came back to us, moved his family back from California where he's working in November, and he's been helping us build something that we're pretty excited about. We are here announcing a managed service that Ahead's going to be coming out with in the next couple months focused initially on Amazon Web Services. So this is a big deal for us, and I want to kind of give you guys a behind-the-scenes peek of what we've built. If you look at the typical MSP model and why people look for an MSP, they need help. And especially as a lot of our customers are looking at Amazon Web Services, they want a partner to kind of guide them through the journey. And most typical MSP approaches are, let's throw a lot of bodies at the problem. Let's go to somewhere where we can hire some low-cost talent, build up a lot of people, and as we scale, we'll just scale by adding bodies. We're taking a drastically different approach to building an MSP. We're scaling via code and building everything in a repeatable infrastructure as code way. And Alex is going to kind of come up and give you a little bit of a behind-the-scenes peek at what we've built. But the initial version of the managed service and what we're targeting is anchored on several core features. And we're not going to dive into a lot of this today, but it's really around cost optimization, security, which Alex is going to really highlight today, is one of the core tenets. Automated data protection, we're integrating everything we do into a service management layer, which is ServiceNow. Monitoring and logging is a core principle of everything. He's going to go into that. Really a hands-off configuration management approach and a very interactive way of working with us via chat ops. Still pick up the phone, but these are some of the core tenets that we've built as part of this managed service. So we've got about 5 minutes with Alex, and then we're going to break. So I'd like to bring him on stage to show you a little sneak peek of the behind the scenes of what we've done. Alex?
Thanks, Eric. My mic on? So to start, I'll kind of cover some basic principles and patterns that we're adhering to as we're building this managed service. For starters, we like to stand on the shoulders of giants, take advantage of the aggregate experience that thousands of cloud customers have built over time. Again, so we're not starting from scratch, and then integrating those with our own best practices. We look at security as job one. So a couple of examples here. We always look from a security perspective for defense in depth. So if I'm talking about networking security, I'm having multiple layers of firewalls, web application firewalls, intrusion detection, as well as integration with the logging capability so I can get an insight into the traffic flows that are traversing my networking environment. So again, I'm not exposing myself to kind of a single point of compromise, for lack of a better term. Principle of least privilege. So for every security policy that we write, whether it's for an individual user or an application or service, we always scope down that policy document to the bare minimum of what any given principal needs to complete its job. Diving a bit deeper, from an operational perspective, so the tooling that we're building to support the managed service is, with very few exceptions, built around serverless compute frameworks. So specifically, again, day one, we're on AWS, so we're taking heavy advantage of the AWS Lambda service. This gives us low cost. Basically, again, we're just, with serverless infrastructure, you're paying in an event-based model, so you're not paying to maintain X number of virtual machines or instances to provide that functionality. It's low operational overhead, right? There's no server that we need to patch and manage and provide care and feeding for. And for us, because there's already a lot of scaffolding set up from a development perspective, our development time is I'd say, substantially quicker than we would be exposed to if we were doing it kind of a more traditional route. The visual that you see here is a sample of one such infrastructure automation piece. Again, this takes care of data protection. So this is basically, think of this as serverless backup. So regardless of whether your application sits on virtual machines or, in AWS parlance, EC2 instances or containers, or perhaps if it's serverless, if the application itself is serverless, we're using a combination of serverless functions, both a snapshot create and a snapshot expire function, tying that into some metadata that exists on those instances by using strict tagging standards. And again, that essentially becomes a handoff approach to data protection on our managed service. everything is deployed and developed as infrastructure as code. So those best practices, both the ones that are available publicly through the public cloud providers or independent third parties, or ones kind of tribal knowledge that we've developed over time, are codified as infrastructure templates. They're tested and they're checked into version control repositories, and those are the change agents for when we roll out either an application stack or a network stack or whatever the case may be. The benefit of having that infrastructure as code approach is that this gives us, again, by checking them into a version control repository, this gives us kind of a time series view of the state of infrastructure within a given environment. Last concept before I dive into the demo, we log everything. So starting at the application layer, we get application logs, we get operating system logs, but everything on the public cloud is essentially an API call away. So why not consume all of those other log sources? So anything from the infrastructure layer, from the API logging layer, my load balancers, my storage, whatever. It becomes extraordinarily easy to pull all those logs in, aggregate them, analyze them, and archive them. So I'll show you one such demo. Again, it's a slide-based demo, so it's a pseudo demo, of kind of a use case where we're taking those logs, some of the logs that we're collecting. In this case, we're taking CloudTrail logs. For those of you not that familiar with AWS, CloudTrail is an audit log of all API calls made to AWS for a given account. Whether it's me making the API calls or a service that's making those API calls on our behalf, we have this time series data about what API calls were made, who did it, what they were trying to do, and against what resources. But this, again, to set the stage for the demo, when you first create an AWS account, you start with the root identity. That's the first thing that you have. That is the super user within an AWS account. It can do anything, right? So it can stand up a fleet of instances. It can store petabytes of data. It's sort of analogous to the administrative user in Windows or the root user in Linux, with one huge difference. Again, now kind of the level of abstraction is a cloud account. So again, it can create any number of resources, and again, if somebody gets access to those credentials, you could be looking at a really pricey bill. So what that means is that we need to first tightly restrict access to those credentials, so do things like add multi-factor authentication for that identity. But we also want to instrument the environment to make sure that, and there are some some instances where it does make sense to use those credentials, but regardless, we want to instrument our logging infrastructure to let us know right away if we detect the usage of that root identity. So here's a sample. Again, for those of you familiar with CloudTrail, this should look very familiar. For those of you that are not, this is what a CloudTrail log record looks like. So again, it's capturing the who, the what, the when, and against what resources a given API call was attempting to do. And what's nice is it captures both the things that were successful, but also the things that weren't successful. So like, for example, if we see somebody using invalid credentials on a regular basis, that's something else that we can alert on. Now again, our job here for this example, and again, this is an underlying system we built for managed service, is to identify an alert when root credentials have been used. So one approach I could take, and I consider this the more passive approach, is I can basically set a metric filter on the log itself and basically say, okay, anytime this kind of text pattern matches root, let me know about it. And this works. It gets me what I want, right? I can see that root's been used at some time in the past. But the problem with this approach is that there's a propagation delay of we've observed anywhere 5 to 10 minutes in between when the event happened and when we can alert on it, before that kind of metric pops up on our map. And given the severity of this type of event, again, so worst case scenario, the root credentials have been compromised, we think we can do better. So here's an alternative pattern. This is taking advantage of a feature within the CloudWatch service called CloudWatch Events. And essentially what we can do is we can tell CloudWatch Events the types of events that we're interested and want to do kind of further inspection on. So here, just to kind of keep things easy to read, I've basically set it up to say, okay, I want to know about all API calls made to the EC2 service, EC2 Elastic Compute Cloud. That's basically if you want to run virtual machines on AWS, you're using EC2. But basically, tell me about any API call made to that service, and I'll define a target for it. I'll basically, when that, emit an event when I find that, or when CloudWatch Events finds that, and tie it to a target. In this case, that target is a Lambda function. Again, in keeping with our desire to have our operational systems built on serverless infrastructure. And what this function does is it takes that payload from CloudWatch Events and inspects it. And it says, OK, let's first find out, did this event come from a root user? If not, we can go about our day, no big deal. But if it did, it's time to contact a human, right? Kind of set the alarm bells ringing. We need to figure out if this was valid or not, or again, but it's something we want to know about Toot Suite. Just to kind of put some numbers, I mentioned the kind of the original pattern that I showed, rough propagation delays in the order of 5 to 10 minutes. With CloudWatch Events, we're looking at least from what we've observed, single-digit seconds. Again, so pretty significant swing in between when we know about these types of things. So this is me being a nefarious user. I'm using my CLI, and I'm also using a profile using the AWS CLI tool that's tied to root credentials. I have no interest in exposing those to everybody in the room, so you'll have to take my word for it. But I'm going ahead and I'm talking to the EC2 service and saying, OK, fire up some instances for me. And then again, through the magic of PowerPoint, we can fast forward a second or two later. And that Lambda function that we wrote has already gone and created an incident within ServiceNow. The incident itself contains a lot of the kind of the particulars about the kind of the metadata that we need about that request. And we can go ahead and begin remediative actions. Again, this is one example of the types, and again, it's not a super sexy kind of example. Well, people don't get super excited when they hear about log analytics and log analysis. But again, when we're thinking security first, these are the types of systems and engines that we need to have in place to minimize the attack surface within and create appropriate responses for any type of security incident. So that's it for me. I'll pass it back to Eric. Thanks, everybody, for your time.
So we are searching. We already have a couple customers that we're working with on from a beta perspective. If you're using AWS, if you want to work with us, we're looking for some beta customers. You can email me directly, eric@thinkahead.com or polaris@thinkahead.com. That's our internal project name for what we've been building. And what we showed you is behind the scenes, but we think how we're building this is pretty unique, and we're very interested to talk to you guys about it.